Princess Zahra Aga Khan, Mr. Feroz Rasool, President of the Aga Khan University, Mr. Naguib Karaj, Trustee of the Aga Khan University, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, what an honor for me to be with you today. To speak on such an auspicious occasion as this, both a celebration of the opening of a magnificent center, and I'll say more of that, and the 35th anniversary of the Aga Khan University. In a previous role, as mentioned, as President and Vice-Chancellor of the University of British Columbia, I had the privilege to explore, develop, and celebrate many links, both personal and institutional, with the Aga Khan Foundation and Development Network. I'm grateful to be given the opportunity, now in my role of Vice-Chancellor at Cambridge, to affirm and strengthen ties of friendship and collaboration between our two institutions. As His Highness the Aga Khan, Chancellor of Aga Khan University, marks his Diamond Jubilee, we celebrate his foresight and his real commitment in opening this visionary international university. As we've heard, since its foundation 35 years ago, the Aga Khan University has changed the lives of more than 14,000 alumni, many of whom would not otherwise have had access to tertiary education. It's changed the lives of many thousands more who've been taught, served, or led by those graduates, as we saw earlier, and who have been treated at its hospitals and clinics. And it will continue to change the lives of thousands and tens of thousands more. As AKU grows, so does the international community it serves. As we heard, it currently operates in 6 countries across 3 continents and will continue to expand in the coming months with the opening of Faculty of Arts and Sciences, as we heard, in Karachi and later in Arusha, Tanzania. I look forward to that. The recent opening of the London Centre has increased the university's capacity in the UK, another major step in the life of this important international institution. And what a stunning place that is, as you saw, designed by Japan's Fumihiko Maki and Associates, but incorporating the traditional courtyard gardens and rooftop terraces of Islamic buildings situated here in the heart of London. It's a building that crosses cultural boundaries, breaking them down, much like the extraordinary Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, the opening of which I was also privileged to attend. As you know, one of the principal occupants of the London building is the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations, which aims to undertake research and provide education in the finest traditions of a free and independent academia. In a world where minds appear to be closing, the Institute promotes scholarship and opens up new perspectives on Muslim heritage, modernity, culture, religion, and society. It is aspirational and truly inspirational. Because it's crucial that in the 21st century, we find new ways of seeing, new ways of sharing our ideas, new ways to tackle the gargantuan problems that face this planet. As you heard, I'm now the custodian of a university that's been established for more than 800 years. And I'm keenly aware that this is a challenging time for universities. Cambridge, which has shown its resilience over the centuries, is being tested today as the UK's higher education sector is buffeted by winds of change. New regulation, political volatility, and the uncertainty over Brexit are just part of what confront us. Criticism and discontent about universities seem to be a constant feature in editorial pages of the national press and in social media. This is far from exclusive to the British situation, however. Similar distrust simmers around the world, alongside budget pressures and the pressure to justify our work. Universities are criticized for being bastions of privilege, for not engaging enough with the disadvantaged, for not encouraging more diversity, for not upholding free speech, for being perhaps irrelevant in the 21st century. Now, of course, there is always work to be done, and I'm the first to admit that there are things we all have to improve in the university sector. But as the late University of Chicago sociologist Edward Shills said of such criticisms more than 30 years ago, quotes, "Some universities are good, many are poor. Nevertheless, societies cling to them. The universities do not survive simply because professors have vested interests in their survival. Societies cling to them because in the last analysis, universities are their last best hope for a transfigured existence." End quote. Our last best hope for a transfigured existence. A transfigured existence. That's quite a tall order for universities, but it's a challenge we must always accept and work to make real. Although we at Cambridge revel in our institution's long history, age really isn't that important when it comes to universities. What matters is their values. What matters is their commitment to groundbreaking research, to transformative education, and to encouraging free and independent thought. Thought that probes and provokes. Thought that interrogates prevailing paradigms. Thought that challenges conventional or received wisdom. Thought that leads to discussion, that leads to collaboration, that leads to more thought, that leads to ideas, that in turn lead to research and innovation, all of which adds up to human development at its best. A transfigured existence. Universities are places where minds are encouraged to develop and where ideas flourish. Universities, seats of learning and discovery, are places that can change the world. Places where the breakthroughs are made and the innovations developed that fuel our future. Places where potential leaders, academic, entrepreneurial, political, artistic, medical, civic, are nurtured. Places where knowledge is created, collected, curated, and communicated, unencumbered by imperatives of profit or passing policy. Places that unite. Places where governments, international organizations, businesses, the not-for-profit sector, and leading researchers and thinkers come together to find solutions to urgent global problems. To quote the Agha Khan himself, universities are places that, quotes, contribute powerfully to building new bridges of unison that blend many distinctive voices into an intelligent, resonant whole, end quote. We live, I regret to say, in a time of anxiety and fear. At such times, it becomes easier for many to retreat behind barriers, to build walls of isolation rather than those bridges of unison. Barricaded behind those walls, people can pretend that the sometimes overwhelming problems of the world don't exist or don't relate to them. They can hide from things they do not want to see or do not want to hear. But as George Orwell once said, and I quote, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear," end quote. Yet the liberty to speak about our perceptions of the truth does not mean the right to ignore the opinions of others. In telling people what they may not want to hear, we must be sensitive to the anxiety in the community and the very genuine reasons for it. We need to understand cultural and economic differences so that we may find the words to speak of our objectives and achievements in ways that don't patronize. Our challenge as universities is to tell our stories, our positive stories, in a way that is both persuasive and powerful. We must engage with the communities we serve, and we must show them that we have their interests at heart, that their interests are our interests. We must cut windows through those walls of isolation. We must open our doors and invite our communities to see what we can do. But we must assume a position of modesty. And we must listen, because through listening we will learn what people hope to hear from us and connect their stories to ours. Through genuine listening, we will counter the perception that universities are elitist institutions. And by telling our stories, we will show that universities are far from strongholds of the establishment. In fact, throughout history, universities have been dynamic catalysts for change. They've often been the springboard for revolutions, whether political, economic, or technological. And it's no accident that university campuses are often the first places to be shut down by autocrats. But perhaps we should ask critics of higher education, as I have asked myself, where would the world be without universities? Well, it may be trite to say simply that life would be different without universities, but it is a fact that the antibiotics we rely upon would not exist without universities, that our current understanding of chemistry, biology, physics would not exist without universities, that computers, the internet, our smartphones would not exist without universities, that today's cars, trains, airplanes would not exist without universities, that many of the greatest achievement of the arts, literature, music, theater, architecture would not exist without universities, and that none of these things would exist unless our scientists and writers and professors, scholars, engineers, lawyers have the freedom to think and to fearlessly pursue their ideas. Now, like all that is good and right, academic freedom comes with obligations. Albert Einstein recognized this when he said, and I quote, "By academic freedom, I understand the right to search for truth and to publish and teach what one holds to be true. This right also implies a duty. One must not conceal any part of what one has recognized to be true. It's evident that any restriction on academic freedom acts in such a way as to hamper the dissemination of knowledge among the people and thereby impedes national judgment and action." End quote. So scholars must be prepared both to say what people do not want to hear and to admit our own mistakes. But this precious academic freedom requires the ability to operate free of external intervention. This university autonomy is not a luxury. It's an indispensable condition for excellence. Deprived of the ability to decide what to teach and research and why, universities are on thin ice indeed. A Canadian can't resist an ice reference. In conflict between our institutions and those that would hold us in check, academic freedom becomes collateral damage. Mathematician and philosopher Nicolas de Condorcet recognized the danger when he wrote from his jail cell during the French Revolution, and I quote, "No branch of the government should have the authority or even the means of preventing the teaching of new truths or the development of theories contrary to its special policies or its momentary interests." End quote. Himself an academic who traversed different disciplines, he was one of the first scholars to apply mathematics systematically in the social sciences. The Marquis de Condorcet believed in equality of the sexes, women's suffrage, free education for all, and the abolition of slavery. He understood that it is our autonomy that allows us to defend the values of academic freedom that are so vital to the existence of universities. Now, he was ultimately branded a traitor for criticizing the French Constitution of 1793, and he died in prison. While here in Britain, we must contend neither with totalitarianism nor a reign of terror, the number of policies and regulations that expect us constantly to demonstrate our economic value now is on the rise. And like my peers across the nation, I've had to defend our need to have the space for intellectual inquiry that may not have obvious immediate impact, nor obvious economic value. The truth is that we have no metrics to show the possibilities inherent in today's fundamental research. We do not yet know the possibilities, and that's the point. When Newton developed the theory of gravity, could he have thought that human beings would one day walk on the moon? When Einstein pioneered his work on lasers, could he have imagined that one day they would be used to perform life-saving keyhole surgery? When scientists built the first computer, filling an entire room, did they anticipate that we would one day walk around with more powerful instruments in our pockets? The changes wrought in our society are not only technological and scientific. Ideas that are incubated in the safety of a university laboratory or common room or lecture hall or library, ideas that occur across every faculty of our institutions, are sparks that ignite the transformation of our society. Those ideas emanate from our greatest assets, our talented women and men. People like Emily Davies and Barbara Bodichon, who dreamed of university education and votes for women. Could they have imagined that one day women would not only be awarded degrees, not only enter politics, but lead nations? We do not yet know what the solution to many of our global problems may be. But we who value universities understand that to find those solutions, we must think more broadly and in a more joined-up way than ever before. As the challenges facing our world grow, so too does our need for universities and our need for talented, educated, resourceful, and thoughtful scholars and graduates. We must rely for our answers not only on the scientists and engineers, but on the experts in the humanities and social sciences. So the evolution towards the liberal arts at Aga Khan University is fundamentally important. We need their capacity to see beyond the scope of problems themselves. We need their ability to put a human perspective on the challenges we face. We need their words to articulate the very questions we must answer. And so we must continue to value and fiercely defend scholarship, autonomy, and academic freedom. We must set an example to our students and, of course, to the community at large. We must give our scholars the freedom to absorb our values, but not bind them to particular theories. We must inspire our students to read widely, to listen to the ideas of others, and to make their own judgments based on the available facts. And we must ensure the foundations on which they stand are sound so that they have the courage of their own convictions to stand up for what they believe to be right and to speak their truth even where it does not fit within the dominant paradigm. That way, we produce the leaders that are so desperately needed in our society, whether in business, politics, the arts, any other sphere of human activity. Leaders who will take on the world's challenges of unprecedented complexity. Leaders who, applying what they've learned at their alma maters, will seek to cut through windows in those walls of isolation. Leaders who value education, diversity, pluralism, and the exchange of cultures. Leaders who can build those bridges of unison, who understand that we need great scientists and writers, engineers and doctors, economists and innovators. We need artists. We need deep thinkers, free to imagine what seems unimaginable and who can make possible the impossible. That we do need universities. We must all recognize the greatness of which human beings are capable so long as they have the wisdom and the freedom to see. And in so doing, we allow ourselves the potential to transfigure our own existence. Thank you.
Professor Toope is willing to take a couple questions if there are any. If there are, we ask you to write them down, raise your hand, and rapidly pass the slip of paper to us. Any takers? How do you push against policies that would seek to constrain and limit liberal education in society? Is that a fair summary?
Well, it's a very big question, and of course one has to, I think, always begin from some cultural specificity. I think the pressures are different in different societies, so I won't purport to try to express an entirely global sentiment on this. Let me say what I think is happening in some Western countries. I think a couple of things are happening, and frankly, no more clearly than right here in the United Kingdom, I'm sad to say. I mean, this is a country that in many ways has been defined historically by its tremendous ability to produce discovery generation after generation. And we think of my sister institution at Oxford, see, there I mentioned it, and Cambridge, and now many other institutions that were created in the last 200 years. There is no better system of higher education in the world. And yet, if you listen to a lot of the discourse around higher education today, there are two things happening. One is that students are being described as, quotes, consumers. And so we actually now have a regulator of higher education that has as part of its mandate to implement consumer protection legislation. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't abuses and sometimes students don't always get what they're promised, and I think we have to deal with those situations. But I also think that treating students as consumers fundamentally misconceives what happens in education, because education, especially a liberal education, is about the student's commitment working with the institution, her professors, her tutors, to try to co-create the knowledge that will matter for that student as they're going forward. So it is not a passive reception of a product, just fundamentally misconceived. So we have to push hard against that. The second trend is one I mentioned, I think, more clearly in my comments, which is understanding education as only about the economic benefit that is received first by the student herself or himself, and then by the nation as a whole. I just got back from Singapore yesterday where I was talking about this subject. And very often, I think universities have made a mistake themselves in over-promising what the university alone delivers in terms of global or widespread societal economic development. We have a role to play in economic development, no question about that. But it's the role of the university, which is teaching and research. And then that goes out into the wider community, and of course, the students become tremendous economic actors in and of themselves, and lots of ideas are then taken up by industry, taken up by business, but the universities don't do that themselves. So we are part of what is often referred to as an ecosystem, but we are not the principal driver of economic activity, and nor are we, in fact, designed to best pursue that goal. We're part of the system, we don't control or drive the system. As for the student, him or herself, I do worry when we think of the economic benefit as the only issue of relevance. I mean, when we saw the pictures of all of those students from the Aga Khan University graduating, yes, it's about the opportunities that we're giving them in their own lives. Of course it is. But it's also about their civic engagement, what it is they're doing as citizens and what it is they're doing as contributors to society. And that's not just about how much money they earn. And so if we become connected only to the first 5 years of earning potential of a graduate of a university as the measure of success, we're missing the big picture. So those two things, I think, have to be struggled against.
One more. Professor Toope, what do you see as Aga Khan University's particular strength or our unique ability to transfigure an individual's existence?
I should say that I've been very privileged to follow the evolution of the Aga Khan University over many years, and I met Feroz years and years ago, and have talked with many people who've been associated in various ways with the university, and it is truly one of the most inspirational stories that you could imagine in higher education. I'm not just saying that to be polite to a lovely audience. It's just remarkable. So what's unique about it? I think the Aga Khan himself identified some of the uniqueness in the quotes that Feroz shared with us. One is, of course, operating within the developing world to the highest global standards. What that tells me is that people in the developing world deserve the best. They don't deserve second-rate institutions, because the talent is every bit as present throughout the developing world as it is in Western societies. And so the commitment to that international standard of excellence is, I think, fundamentally important, and I hope will be a springboard for other local institutions to aspire to similar degrees of excellence. So that's point one. Point two is the idea that in many ways is borrowed from American higher education more than any other, that admission should be needs blind. That's a huge achievement, to be able to say to people coming from very underprivileged backgrounds that they will nonetheless have access to a university education, and they don't have to be afraid that they can't find the resources to be there. That is a huge asset. And you put those two together, and you've got something dramatically powerful. Globally measured excellence and actual access. Because so often in the developing world, the excellence is limited to the elites. And the people have access to only the second and third rate. So I just want to say thank you to the visionaries and to the Aga Khan himself in creating this sense of purpose for the Aga Khan University, and to the many hundreds and thousands of people who've worked so hard to make it real and to bring it to fruition. And I wish many, many, many more years, let's say 800 more years, of tremendous success.
One more, and I didn't write this, so just when I get to the question, believe me, I didn't write this. Universities are bastions for disruption. How do you see the translation of disruption from the developing world to the developed world? And here's the part I didn't write. And how can Western universities support this knowledge transfer for us?
I actually think that is the question of our era. Apart from all the big challenges like climate change, et cetera, it's how can institutions that are very strong and powerful in the West actually open themselves to learn from colleagues in the developing world. And we are actually beginning to have that conversation. It may seem strange in a place like Cambridge. You'd think, there's not going to be much interest in that. But I'm sure many of you have followed some of the pressures that our students are bringing around trying to, quotes, decolonize the curriculum, for example. And that can be a very superficial debate, or it can be quite a profound debate. And the issue for me is, what are we missing because we're locked into only one tradition of learning, which has been inherited, and it's a very powerful tradition of which I am deeply proud. But it is only a tradition. And if we don't allow ourselves to listen to the voices that are coming from other parts of the world much more effectively, then I think our institutions over time will become less relevant and, frankly, less influential, people will start to look elsewhere. And so there is a reason that there's more and more globalization taking place amongst university leaders and amongst professors. My colleagues are more and more engaging with people, not only in the top US institutions. I met just yesterday, in fact, with the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, a young black woman, first one ever to be heading that university. And one of the things we were talking about is how we can learn from the very complicated experiences they have had in trying to change the curriculum in a very difficult set of circumstances. What can we learn from them that would help us as we try to reimagine elements of our curriculum? And this goes right across the university. It's not only in sociology or anthropology that this has to happen, it also has to happen, I think, in some of the STEM disciplines. Not to pretend that Western science has not really achieved tremendous things. Of course, we never want to deny our own tradition. But I think to try to understand better how there are certain elements that could be better pursued using different types of approaches that we can learn from colleagues in the developing world, I think we have to be open to that, and I think we're going to see that as a very striking trend over the course of the next 50 years or so. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, thank you, Professor Toope. You take us back to the words in the founding documents, the Harvard Commission report and the Chancellor's report. You draw the theme clearly to the wishes and the directions of our Chancellor, the focus on freedom to explore, responsibility to listen and serve, and the expectations that we produce the leaders of tomorrow. These are all foundational to the Aga Khan University, and despite the fact that we work in 6 countries with 6 ministries and 6 commissions and 18 regulators, we can do complexity, but we have to not forget the core principles. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much.